These stories are first-hand accounts shared by Reddit users, detailing unsettling real-life encounters that left lasting impressions. Each narrative provides a chilling glimpse into moments of danger, survival, and eerie coincidences that might make you rethink your surroundings. Disclaimer: these accounts were originally published by Reddit users and are presented as personal experiences. While they're described as true events, their accuracy relies on the original storytellers. The details shared here are intended for awareness and cautionary purposes only. Viewer discretion is advised. Story 1. The trail warning said, "Beware the unwalking." I thought it was a joke until it crossed a mile of forest in the time it took me to blink. I believe that my world is based on objective, measurable facts. I built my identity on it. I'm a trail runner, an elite one if I may say, or at least I was. For me, I did not trust in stories, but every remote trail has its local legends, its boogeymen. Spook stories told around campfires by people who get winded walking to their car. I've always viewed them with a kind of arrogant disdain. Ghosts in the woods? Monsters in the dark? It's just a lack of context. A snapped twig is a bear, a strange shadow is a tree, a weird feeling is just dehydration. There is always a rational explanation. That's what I believed anyway. Before the trail. It's not on any official maps. It's an unsanctioned loop, a brutal, unforgiving track known to the small, hardcore community of local runners simply as the Needle. It's a 50-mile sufferfest of punishing climbs and technical descents through one of the most remote, untouched national forests in the country. It's a legend in its own right, and I was going to be the one to finally set a speed record on it. I started at dawn. The air was cool and sharp, the forest silent except for the whisper of the wind. My body felt perfect, a well-oiled machine humming with potential. My watch was synced, my pack was light, my confidence was absolute. The trailhead was marked by a series of crude, faded warnings hammered into the trees. Scraps of wood with words painted in what looked like old house paint. Beware the unwalking. Stay away from the trail. Do not push further. I actually laughed. It was so perfectly cliché. The unwalking. It sounded like something a teenager would invent to scare his girlfriend. I took a picture of the signs, a little joke for my running group later, and started my watch. The first few hours were a blur of green motion. My legs pumped, my lungs burned in that familiar, pleasant way. The forest was beautiful, I suppose, but to me, it was just a problem set. A series of obstacles, roots, rocks, inclines to be overcome with maximum efficiency. Around 3 hours in, I reached the first major landmark, a high, windswept ridge that offered a panoramic view of the entire valley. I paused to hydrate and check my progress. The data was beautiful. My pace was solid. My heart rate was in the optimal zone. It was an incredible time. I stood there, feeling that familiar surge of physical accomplishment, and scanned the vast, rolling expanse of green. That's when I saw it. On a distant, parallel ridge, miles away, was a detail that didn't belong. It was a tall, thin, dark shape, stark against the skyline. It was unnaturally still, unnaturally straight. It lacked the fractal, chaotic shape of a tree or the rounded, weathered look of a rock formation. It was just a line, a vertical anomaly in a horizontal world. I got out my phone, thinking it might make a cool, eerie photo. I zoomed in as far as the digital zoom would allow, but the image dissolved into a pixelated mess. The shape was just a slightly darker smudge. I didn't even bother taking the picture. A dead, lightning-stripped tree trunk, maybe, or a weirdly shaped pillar of rock. Visually interesting, but ultimately meaningless data. I made a mental note of its GPS coordinate on my watch and continued my run. The thought was already fading. The next 2 hours were brutal. The trail plunged down into a dark, damp valley, a punishing section of switchbacks and stream crossings. I pushed the pace, enjoying the burn, feeling my body perform flawlessly. When I finally climbed out of the valley and onto the next ridge, I felt phenomenal. I'd crushed that section. I stopped, panting, and glanced at my watch to confirm the massive distance I'd just covered. The screen read, distance, 0.2 miles. Time elapsed, 2 hours, 4 minutes, and 17 seconds. I froze. My breath hitched in my chest. It was impossible. A glitch. It had to be. My watch must have lost its GPS signal down in the dense canopy of the valley. That was the only rational explanation. Annoyed, I shook my wrist as if that would fix it. I held down the button and rebooted the device. It took a long, frustrating minute to reacquire the satellite signals, its little icon blinking, searching. Finally, it beeped. The screen refreshed. The result was the same. 0.2 miles. A cold, unfamiliar feeling, something that was almost but not quite yet. I think fear began to uncoil in my stomach. Frustrated and unnerved, I turned and looked back towards the peak where I'd been 2 hours ago. It should have been a distant, hazy silhouette on the horizon. Instead, it was right there, looming over me, so close. It was as if I had barely moved at all. And on the distant, parallel ridge, the dark shape was still there. I squinted. I couldn't be sure, but it felt larger, more defined, closer. I squeezed my eyes shut, then opened them again. The watch is broken. My eyes are playing tricks on me from the exertion. It's a simple, logical chain of cause and effect. I forced the panic down, turning it into a hot, angry energy. I would just run harder. I would outrun the glitch. I started running again with a frantic, furious desperation. The next few hours, the world broke. The trail, which was famously a single, unbroken track, began to defy logic. I passed a distinctive, lightning-scarred oak tree, its trunk split down the middle in a jagged, black wound. I noted it as a landmark. An hour later, after a grueling climb up a steep, rocky incline, I passed the exact same tree. The same split trunk, the same blackened scar. Panic finally breached my defenses. It flooded my system, cold and sharp. I stopped, gasping for air, my mind racing to find a rational explanation. I must have gotten turned around. I must have taken a branching path I hadn't noticed. But there were no branching paths. The trail was a simple, brutal loop. My own data, senses, understanding of space and time, it was all failing me. I decided to stop, to get my bearings, and force logic back into a situation that had become illogical. I found a small clearing, the sunlight a welcome relief after the deep gloom of the forest. I sat on a fallen log, my head in my hands, trying to calm my racing heart, trying to reboot my own brain. I sat there for a long time, just breathing. When I finally lifted my head, I scanned the tree line, trying to reestablish some sense of normalcy. And I saw it again. What I saw on a distant ridge before was just here, standing at the edge of the very same clearing I was in, perhaps 200 yards away, and what was just a shape is now a figure. It looked as though someone had taken a tall, dead, blackened tree and twisted it into the grotesque parody of a human form. It was impossibly tall and thin, its limbs like fire-hardened branches, its body a column of what looked like charred bark. It had no discernible face, no features, but I knew, with a certainty that defied all reason, that it was watching me. It stood utterly, completely motionless, its posture unchanged from when I had first seen it miles away. I didn't scream. I didn't run. My mind was too busy trying to solve the impossible equation. How to get here? Or a more terrifying thought, had I in my looping, nonsensical journey walked in a circle and ended up right back where it had been all along? Had I been running towards it without realizing it? I had to be sure. I had to apply my own logic, my own methodology. I decided to perform an experiment. I kept my eyes locked on the figure. I refused to blink. I refused to look away. My heart was a frantic drum, but my gaze was a steel anchor. For 10 solid minutes, I stared. The thing did not move a millimeter. Not a twitch, not a sway in the gentle breeze. It was as solid and still as the earth it stood on. A sliver of hope, of rational explanation, returned. It was just a statue, some macabre piece of local folk art, put out here to scare people. The looping trail, the GPS glitch, it was all in my head, a product of exhaustion and paranoia. I felt a wave of foolish relief. I turned my head away for no more than 3 seconds. Just a quick, reflexive glance to my side to reach for my water bottle. The snap of my head turning back was just as fast. The thing was now 50 yards away. It hadn't moved. It hadn't taken a step. It was in the exact same silent, still, waiting pose. But the 150 yards of dense, tangled forest that had been between us was simply gone. The space, the distance, had vanished in the 3 seconds I had looked away. The understanding hit me with the force of a physical blow. The warnings at the trailhead. Beware the unwalking. It didn't walk. It didn't have to. I ran. My training, my discipline, my carefully engineered body, it all dissolved into the pure animal instinct of a prey animal that has just seen the teeth of the predator. I just ran. The forest became a green, whipping, meaningless tunnel. My lungs burned. My legs screamed for mercy. But I pushed harder, calling on every reserve of strength I had ever built. I refused to look back. The terror of what I might see, of how much closer it might be, was a physical weight on my shoulders. I just stared straight ahead, my eyes wide, focused on a future that didn't involve that silent, waiting shape. And then I noticed it. I was running, my feet pounding the earth, my arms pumping. I could feel the motion, the effort. But the trees beside me weren't moving. A specific, moss-covered birch tree was just there in my peripheral vision, staying perfectly in place, no matter how hard I ran. I was a hamster on a wheel. I was generating motion, but I was not achieving movement. I was running in place, and the forest was a static, painted backdrop. My mind shattered. A choked, terrified sob tore from my throat. I had to look back. I couldn't bear not knowing. I risked a single, fleeting glance over my shoulder. It was right behind me, so close I could have reached out and touched its charred, bark-like skin. It hadn't moved. It was just there. It had simply deleted the space between us. The sight of it broke the last of my resolve. My foot caught on a rock I hadn't seen, and I went down hard. My head hit the ground, and the world dissolved into a brief, brilliant flash of white light. And then, mercifully, nothing at all. I woke up shivering. I was lying on the damp, cold ground under a tree. I sat up, my head throbbing, my body crying of aches and bruises. I looked around. I recognized the crude, faded signs hammered into the trees. Stay away from the trail. I was back at the trailhead. I don't know how I got there. I don't know what happened after I fell. I was just returned, discarded. The trail was still there, a dark mouth leading into the woods. I scrambled to my feet, my legs unsteady, and I fled. I didn't look back. I got in my car and drove, and I didn't stop until I was home. I thought it was over. A nightmare confined to that cursed stretch of woods. Then a week ago, I noticed the patch. It's on the back of my left hand. It started as a small, discolored spot, about the size of a quarter. The skin felt dry, strangely hard. I thought it was a callus or a rash. But it's growing. The skin is turning a pale, ashen gray. It's lost all its feeling. And the texture is all wrong. It's developing a fine, vertical grain. It looks and feels for all the world like a patch of smooth, petrified wood. I've been to 3 doctors. They're baffled. They've taken samples. They've run tests. They have no answers. They use words like sclerotic and unknown dermatological condition. They give me creams that do nothing. The patch is bigger now. It's spread to my wrist. And I know, with a certainty that is slowly crushing the life out of me, what it is. I looked away, and it closed the distance. I ran, and it froze the space around me. I fell at its feet. It touched me. And now, a piece of it is inside me, growing. I don't know what to do. Do I go back? Do I face it? Would that even do anything? Or do I just sit here and wait, and watch myself slowly turn into a tree? The facts are gone. The logic is gone. All that's left is this impossible growth, and the memory of a silent, waiting shape, and the terrifying knowledge that you can't outrun something that doesn't have to move. Story 2. We went searching for ghosts, but found something much worse. My fascination with ghosts and the paranormal began 2 years ago. It was a cool summer night, and it was beginning to rain. Me and my friends, Dan and Todd, were walking back home from a night on the town, which isn't saying much as we live in a small town with a population of 1,400 people. We were walking down Redacted Street despite Dan's protest. He hated taking this path home because of the decaying school that sat dormant on this street. Rumor around town was that the school is haunted. People say they have heard screaming and wailing from the school at night, but Todd says it's all bullshit. It's a large modern brick building standing 2 floors tall and takes up the entire block. It was once a nice up-to-date school, but it closed down a couple years prior due to a dwindling student population. A year later, it was bought by an old mechanic in town, and he intended to renovate it into a hotel, but the city said the school was on the verge of being condemned due to the West Wing's 2nd floor being on the verge of collapse. So now it sits nearly empty. The mechanic Charlie lives alone in the school and works out of the old auto shop room, so his investment wouldn't be a complete waste. Charlie denies the claims of the school being haunted. As we walk closer to the school, Dan and Todd were arguing about how haunted the school was. I just don't see why we couldn't take a different route home. Dan said, "This area gives me the heebie-jeebies. This is the fastest route home." And "I'm not trying to get caught in the rain," Todd replied. "It's just a bunch of small-town gossip is all. This town has nothing else going on, so they make things up to stay interesting. I went here when I was a kid," I added. "There's nothing scary about it." The closest occurrence we had was me almost dying of boredom a couple times. Yeah, very funny," Dan sighed. "My dad says he refuses to step foot on this street after what he heard one night." "Okay, but your dad is also a drunk, so who knows what he actually heard," said Todd. As Dan and Todd continued bickering about how scary the school was, I heard a faint tapping sound coming from nearby. I stopped dead in my tracks. It sounded like a hand tapping on glass. "Guys, shut up for a sec," I said. "Do you hear that?" They slowed to a stop, and I realized the sound was coming from the direction of the school. The tapping sound became louder, as if someone was beating on a window. I didn't see anything at first, but as I looked closer into the school, I saw the outline of a girl in one of the lower windows. "There, in the West Wing. There's a girl in the window on the bottom floor." I stammered as I grabbed my phone from my pocket. "Which window?" Todd asked. "There's a lot of windows, dude." "Oh shit, there. I see her," Dan yelled. I opened the camera on my phone to try recording a video, but before I could, I heard a piercing scream, and I dropped my phone. I bent down and picked my phone up off the ground. When I looked back up, she was gone. "Where'd she go?" I asked frantically. "She dropped below the window," Dan responded. "I don't see her anymore." I continued looking around, but Dan was right. She was gone. "Damn it," I exclaimed. "I should have got that on video." "I didn't see anything," Todd stated. "Are you sure you saw a girl? That screech could have been anything." "Yes, dude, I'm sure. That was the scariest moment of my life. Now I'm ready to get the hell out of here. Let's go," Dan said, while picking up the pace back towards home. "Wait, shouldn't we find out what the hell that was?" I asked. "How?" "It's private property," asked Todd. "If you want to call the cops and tell them you saw a ghost girl in the school, you can go right ahead. But I'm going to join Dan and get out of here. It's starting to rain," as he turned to catch up with Dan. I cursed under my breath again, upset that I messed up what would have been the best ghost evidence on the internet. I took one more look at the school before turning around to join my friends. That moment sparked my inspiration to start a YouTube channel, so Todd, Dan, and I launched a channel a few months after. We have been on a dozen ghost hunts by now, with little to no evidence to show for it, but we have amassed 60K subscribers. The closest thing we have to evidence is a door closing on its own during our investigation of an abandoned mall. Todd is adamant that it was a draft, but Dan argues it was definitely something paranormal and that Todd is ignorant. Other than that, though, all we have caught are some loud creaks and bangs while investigating abandoned houses, which I realize can easily be brushed off as nothing. I am certain that our big break would be if we could investigate the school. Ever since word of our channel got around town, people have told me many stories regarding that building, and they insist that's what we should investigate next. I've already tried asking the owner, Charlie, if I could. He said he would if he could, but his insurance doesn't want anyone else going in that building, and that they're already opposed to him living there as is. So for now, I have just been recording the neighborhood stories to hopefully make into a video later. I woke up this morning to my phone ringing. I rolled over disgruntledly to see Todd calling. "What do you want?" I answered a bit harshly. "Well, good morning to you too, sunshine," Todd responded. "Well, excuse me. It is 8 a.m. on a Saturday. What is so important that it couldn't have been a text?" I asked. "Well, I call with good news," Todd said. "Okay, well, what is it then?" I replied curiously. "Charlie died," Todd stated a bit too excitedly. I paused before asking, "How is this good news, Todd?" "Well, it's not, but it's good for us at least. Because this means we can finally investigate the school," he replied. I took a moment, thinking it over, unsure what to say. I had only woken up moments ago, and now I'm being told Charlie is dead and that we should investigate his school. Todd added, "Abby just told me. His body is going to the coroner's office this morning. An officer found his car wrapped around a tree. They suspect it happened last night." Todd's wife, Abby, works for the city, so of course she has the inside scoop. "There's a slight hitch, though," Todd added. "What's that?" I asked. Well, Abby tried to notify the next of kin, but all that he had listed was some guy down south. She told him the news, and he told her that he would be coming up in a couple days and that he's going to buy the school when he gets there. Todd said, "That's odd." I added, "He has quite the list of priorities, I guess. What would he want with a condemned school anyways?" I was wondering the same thing Todd said, but regardless, that means we would have to investigate it soon, before the buyer gets into town. Todd was right. We could investigate the school now that Charlie is dead. It probably isn't very considerate, but it's a possibility nonetheless, and we wouldn't get another possibility like this again. "Okay, I'll tell Dan." I said finally, "We will investigate the school tonight." It was well after dark as we approached the school. It's even more ominous when we are this close, especially when it is bathed in the night. The building looks weathered yet surprisingly current, and beside for the paint flaking and fading away, it looks just as I remember it from when I was a student. We crossed the empty parking lot, and as we got to the front doors, Todd spoke first. "So, do we just walk in through the front door, or did anyone make a plan for how we get inside?" he asked. I looked over to Dan, and he gave me a small shrug as a response. I responded, "I guess I didn't consider that part. I put too much thought into whether or not we should and didn't think about if we even could." Dan let out a light chuckle, saying, "I was more worried about if it's more or less illegal to break into a man's house after he is dead. Is it still breaking and entering if he is dead, or is this just trespassing? I'm no lawyer, and I'm barely a ghost hunter, but from a legal standpoint, I'm going to say maybe I joked." "Well, he did say he would be okay with it if it weren't for his insurance," Todd replied. "Who would we sue now if we got hurt?" "Okay, that's a reasonable point, I suppose," I said, trying to make myself feel better about this potential crime. "But we better figure out a way inside here soon. I don't want any cops to see us. Does anyone have any ideas?" Todd bent over and grabbed a large rock. "No, put that down, dude," Dan said in a hushed shout. "That would definitely be breaking and entering." "Well, do you have a better idea?" Todd asked, as Todd and Dan squabble about the most acceptable way to break into the school. I approached the front doors. I put my hands on the doors and gave a little push, and to our surprise, they actually opened. "He left them unlocked?" asked Dan. "I guess," I responded. "It is a small town after all. Maybe he didn't plan to be out for long." Todd and Dan entered the building behind me. The doors closed behind us, and we could hear the sound echo throughout the vast building. We turned on our shoulder lights. The school still has power running to it, but we don't want any neighbors to see the lights on. The school has an odd aesthetic to it, since it is now redesigned to be a home. We stood in the entryway, which is a large open hallway now designed as a very open living room. There were a few display cases along the nearest wall that now holds Charlie's shoes and coats. The room has a few couches and an older TV. Neither of them seem to be used in a while. "You guys ready?" I asked as I pulled out the camera. "Yes, but please don't do your regular intro for our video," Todd pleaded. "Why not? I've done it for every video," I asked. "Dude, it's annoyingly stereotypical. If this video does blow up our channel like you say it will, we can't have that type of introduction for the new viewers," Todd stated. "Okay, well, do you want to do the introduction then?" I asked him. "Well, no. That'd be even worse," he said. "Okay then. I'll do the introduction my way then," I stated. I turned the camera around to face me and hit the record. "Good evening, our dubious ghost viewers. We are back again with another investigative video. Tonight we are investigating my local school. This building is a bit of a local legend. There's so many terrifying stories about this location, so we just had to investigate it. So get ready to start believing in the paranormal, but before you do, don't forget to like and subscribe." I hit pause on the camera, and it was followed by a deafening silence in the room. I could see Todd and Dan holding back laughter. "I agree with Todd. That shit sounds pathetic, dude." Dan laughed finally. Yeah, I know, I said, it always does. That one hurt. Todd chuckled while shaking his head. Can we go explore now, with that out of the way? Yes, please, I said dejectedly. To the right of the now living room is the gymnasium, and to the left is the swimming pool. We elected to explore the gymnasium first. The gymnasium didn't appear to be altered at all. It also didn't appear to have been used lately. The bleachers are dusty, and the floor looks as if it hadn't been swept in at least a year. I pulled out my camera to record some footage while we performed our tests. Our investigation usually starts with an Ouija board. Most ghost hunters claim this is complete BS, and honestly we agree, but it does provide some good content. We didn't get much, if any, movement from the board this time, besides for Todd trying to spell out PNIS a couple times. The next test we like to try is the spirit box. Todd absolutely hates this device, and I can see why, but Dan is convinced it is legit. We'll let the spirit box run for a while. Dan said he heard some related words, but I think he was really stretching his imagination because all I heard was incoherent nonsense. I usually check an EMF reader while we investigate, but it was very unreliable tonight due to the building actually having power for once. And speaking of power, the air conditioner scared the hell out of us a couple times during the testing. We're used to it being dead silent, and we fine-tune our ears to pick up any noises, so when the AC roared to life, we all jumped. Once we agreed we weren't getting any evidence in this area, we walked across the hall to the swimming pool. The room is humid and smells like chlorine despite the 12-foot pool being drained. The hot tub had a couple renovations from the last time I'd seen it. There is now a TV mounted nearby and a new mini fridge sitting adjacent. We ran a few tests in this room as well, with no proof yet again. We wandered over to the locker rooms, which are just outside of the swimming area. We entered the men's room, and it appeared to be well used. I assumed this was Charlie's main bathing area based off of the fresh towels sitting in the lockers and dirty laundry sitting in a hamper in the corner. The sink has a couple of new drawers built onto it, with his toiletries sitting on top. We didn't stay in here for long or record any video, as it felt invasive even though he was gone. I stepped back into the hall and took an awkward glance into the women's locker room. Hey, bud, what you looking at? Dan asked. Is this how I find out you are a pervert? I'm just curious. Haven't you wondered what a women's locker room is like? I asked. Sure, but it's probably the same as the men's, just without the urinals, and maybe different paint, Todd stated. Okay, what don't you guys want to find out? Now is our chance, I said. Sure, I suppose, why not? Let's go peep in the girls' bathroom, Todd said while walking in. When we entered the locker room, we were surprised and speechless from what we saw. The women's room also appears to be well used, but by girls, which was concerning because Charlie didn't have a wife nor kids. The lockers contained towels and girls' clothing, ranging from children's size to adult. The doors on the stalls were removed. Todd broke the silence by saying, "What the fuck? Are you guys disturbed by this as well?" This is definitely concerning. This doesn't make any sense, I replied. Why would Charlie have girls' clothes here, and why so much? It's just him that lives here. Todd asked. Before I had a chance to reply, Dan shushed us, his eyes wide with fear, and stammered, I think I just heard someone knocking. As in, knocking how Todd asked, still focused on the locker room. Like when you knock on somebody's front door, politely waiting to be let inside, Dan said. Could have been old pipes, maybe? Todd asked, still looking around the locker room. No, it definitely sounded like a hand knocking on a door. As in knock knock, who's there, Dan said. I'm telling you guys, dash. Knock knock knock. He was interrupted by the knocking. It must have been louder this time as Todd and I both heard it clearly. Dan was right, it definitely sounded like someone knocking on a door. Even Todd looked like he agreed. I turned my camera on and we stepped back into the hall. I asked, is it coming from the front door? Did someone find out we are here? Maybe, Dan said. It's so hard to tell. The building echoes so much. I started cautiously walking to the front door when we heard it again. Knock, knock, knock. That sounded like it came from down the hall, Todd stated. That leads deeper into the school. That's the hall that brings you to either the west or east wings, I said. Well, I don't like that, Dan said as the three of us began walking down the hall. The hall felt as if it was a mile long, and it felt like I was running one based on how hard my heart was beating. I'm excited that this will be the first bit of actual evidence we have ever gotten, but I am also terrified. We finally got to the end of the hall, There are two sets of double doors on either side of the hall. The right set of doors are open. They lead into the east wing, which is the high school, assumedly where Charlie used to live. The left doors are chained shut. They lead into the west wing, which is the elementary school. That is the condemned wing, so that's probably why they are chained shut. Which way do you think it came from? Todd asked. We got our answer as we heard another knock. Knock. Knock to the left, and I saw the west wing doors shake and bind against the chains. I slowly approached the doors and asked, "Hello, who is it?" with false confidence. In response, we heard a quick pattering fleeing from the door, like little footsteps running away in a game of tag. We sat in silence for a moment, my confidence quickly fading. Dan pushed on the doors and said, "We have to get into the west wing. There's clearly something back there. Do you think Charlie left the key somewhere while he pulled on the lock?" "Maybe," I replied, "but actually the east and west wings share a lunchroom. So the two sides meet up again at the cafeteria. Maybe those doors are less secure and easier to break into." "Well, let's take a trip through the east wing then," Todd said, "before that critter gets away." We all shared a look of agreement and headed through the high school doors. The high school side appears to be more taken care of. The carpet looks recently vacuumed and the walls have been repainted. We walked through the vacant halls, passing by empty classrooms. I recorded some more with the camera, while Dan and Todd were bickering yet again. Dan said, "There is no way you actually think that was an animal back there." "It had to be," Todd responded. "What else could it be? A ghost? A ghoul? Some sort of monster maybe. We are ghost hunting, so yes, I do think it could be a ghost. That is the whole reason we are out here. That's what we are trying to find," Dan stated. Todd stayed quiet, probably because Dan has a pretty good point. "What kind of animal do you think it was then?" Dan asked half-jokingly. "I don't know. That's why we're going over there. It has to be something pretty big, though," Todd said unconvincingly. "Oh, come on, dude, seriously? Do you hear yourself right now?" Dan asked. We passed by the auto shop. It lay empty, which seemed odd to me. The shop hasn't changed much, beside for the addition of Charlie's tools. The room is fairly dusty, but it's hard to tell if that's out of the ordinary for auto shops. The attached classroom is renovated into an office space. A newer computer sits atop his desk with a few file cabinets sitting along the nearby wall. We searched the office for his keys, but we found nothing, so we kept heading for the cafeteria. I led us through the next corridor and through a shortcut through the library. It has been remodeled into an oversized living room area. A couple couches and a reclining chair sat around a large TV with a nice sound system. A couple of the bookshelves now hold an extensive collection of movies and CDs. We plan to come back to this room and investigate it further after we checked out the West Wing. We took a quick detour to explore the principal's office, which is now Charlie's bedroom. The layout reminds me of a small apartment. There's a waiting room when you first walk in, which connects to Charlie's bedroom and main bathroom. It is well decorated. The waiting area has a couple plants sitting in the corners of the room, and the walls are arranged with posters of old metal bands I don't recognize. His bedroom is also well kept. The bed is made, and his nightstand seems organized. We searched this area as well, but did not have any more luck finding the keys. I was beginning to worry that he may have had the keys on him the night he died, but I tried to push that thought away as we continued our expedition to the cafeteria. We finally arrived at the cafeteria. It is a spacious room lined with rows of long tables. I looked closer at the tables and saw something that troubled me. There are about a dozen lunch trays loaded with food sitting on a couple of the tables. The food looks to be only a day or two old. I pointed out to the guys, and Todd seems equally troubled by it. We were confused about why Charlie would need so many trays for himself, but Dan walked by us, clearly more interested in the doors that connect to the West Wing, expressing a bravery we haven't seen from him before. He stepped up at the doors and gave them a push. They are locked, so he took a couple steps back, and before either Todd or I can protest, he kicks the doors open. We caught up to Dan, and I said, a heads up would have been nice. Dan replied, "Well, we couldn't find the keys, and I don't know of any other ways in. So how else were we going to get into the elementary school?" Todd said, "I don't know, dude. You didn't really give us any time to weigh our options." "Okay, well, it's too late now, so why are we wasting time debating how to get through the doors when I've already kicked them down?" Dan asked smugly. "Okay, fair enough. You make a good point. Let's go then," Todd said, leading the way into the elementary school. Before following them, I record a quick extra bit of footage of the cafeteria, still troubled by the lunch trays. Eventually, I turned back towards my friends, hurriedly closing the gap into the West Wing. The West Wing is more neglected, but still holds the appearance of an elementary school. Most of the rooms still have the old desks and classroom decor, but are covered in a heavy layer of dust. This side of the school smells musty and stale. All of the windows on this side are boarded up. The walls are painted pastel colors, and the floors have colored lines which lead to different portions of the school. We saw no obvious signs of what was knocking on the door earlier, so we decided we should walk back to the first set of doors in hopes that we might find something closer to where the knocking first occurred. As we got deeper into the elementary school, I noticed something. The West Wing is in very nice condition. It looks clearly abandoned, but it didn't appear to be on the verge of collapse like Charlie said it was. I mentioned it to the guys. "Hey, does this wing look very condemned to you too?" I asked. They paused to look around. Todd said, "I'm no building inspector, but I would agree. This wing does look pretty nice so far. I wouldn't condemn it." Dan commented, "I thought Charlie said it was the second floor that was dangerous. We haven't made it up there yet." "I guess," I said, "but I assumed there would be damage on the first floor as well, if the second floor was about to collapse." They just shrugged and continued exploring. As we traipsed past the computer lab, Dan stopped us, silently raising a hand. "What's up? Why are you acting all Black Ops right now?" Todd whispered. "Do you hear that?" Dan asked, "Do you hear that humming?" We fell silent, and I heard it. It's a sing-songy type of humming coming from within the computer lab. We exchanged nervous glances, and I lead the way, slowly prowling into the room. The lab has numerous computers lining every wall and a couple rows down the middle. I can hear the humming clearer now that we are inside, but I can't quite make out the song. We can't see the source of the humming right away, so we split up to get a better look. I slowly approach one of the middle rows. I apprehensively looked under the desks, and I discovered what singing is. A young girl is crouched under the desk on the far end. She's wearing a dirty stained nightgown, and her hair is matted. She is rocking back and forth slowly, and I can now hear her whimpering, "They need help," as she hums. I froze, unsure how to proceed. She must have felt my eyes on her, because she quit humming and sat still. Slowly, she turns her head to look at me. She looks me dead in the eyes, unblinking, and lets out an ear-piercing, raspy shriek. I jump back terrified, and she leaps at me. I narrowly avoid her, but I somehow manage to drop the camera as she runs by me and towards the door. She ran into the hall screaming, "You shouldn't be here," and "Get out." I look back at the guys. They both sit petrified. "Guys, snap out of it. We gotta follow her," I yell while picking up my camera off the floor. Thankfully, it still works. Dan rushed to my side, and we ran into the hall in the direction the girl fled. We rounded the corner at the end of the corridor and saw the girl standing completely still with her hand pointing towards the stairs. I stop and pull out my camera, recording clear footage of the girl. She whispers, "They are up there. Please help us." Dan said, "Fuck this dude, I'm out. We got our footage. That's enough for me," and turns around racing towards the nearest exit. "Dan, wait," I yell, pleading. I turn back towards the girl, but she's gone. Nervously, I look around for her. I see fresh footprints in the dust that lead upstairs, but I'm not about to go up there alone. "Yeah, fuck this." I agree and run back the same way as Dan. I found Dan and Todd back in the computer lab. Todd shook out of his horror, but he was still spooked. I approach him saying, "It's time to go, buddy. I got our footage. Let's leave." Dan nodded in anxious agreement, leading us out the door. We quickly retrace our steps back to the cafeteria. I'm a bit concerned about Todd. I've never seen him this quiet before, but Dan is able to escort him out ahead of me. We made it back to the cafeteria without an event. I turned back momentarily to close the doors behind us. Then we paused briefly to catch our breath. "What the hell was that?" Dan asked, still rattled. "I think I was our first ghost," I said excitedly. "Once we get out of here, I can't wait to say I told you so," Dan said, playfully pushing Todd. Todd laughed anxiously. "Yeah, I guess you guys are right. I think that was actually a ghost. Did you get on camera?" "Oh yeah, I did. This video is going to blow us up. The footage I got is perfect. I dare to say the best evidence on the entire internet," I responded. "You guys ready to go home so we can get that footage posted then? Dan asked. Yes, I'm very ready to get the hell out of here, Todd said. We headed back the way we came, following our footsteps through the high school, through the once home of old Charlie. I still have a lot of questions after this expedition, but for now I'm focusing on getting home. We made it through the high school easily and got back to the hallway that divides the west and east wings. I let out a sigh of relief as I saw the entryway doors at the end of the hall. I took a moment near the west doors to look at the chains, when the door slowly creaked open and rattled as it bound against the chains. A face now peering at us through the gap. As soon as I locked eyes with her, the doors began to violently shake, and I heard a girl's voice yelling and crying. Let us out, please. Please, you have to set us free. Help us. She started pounding heavily on the door and continued pleading, but we already began running in the opposite direction. We barged through the entryway doors, and I was half tempted to kiss the ground as I stepped foot on the parking lot. I looked around at my friends, their faces mixed with emotions, partially excited but also terrified. We recorded a quick outro outside of the school. I'm unsure if it will be usable since we are so clearly shaken up. Dan gave a couple middle fingers to the old school, but Todd and I didn't look back. Finally, I put the camera away, and we got into my car, relieved to be heading home and ready to post the video of what we found. It didn't take long for the video to blow up like we suspected. I spent the entire next day editing the video so I could post it as soon as possible. I was able to post it on Sunday night, just a day after our investigation. By Thursday, the video was on the trending tab with 1 million views. Our channel blew up, gaining 500,000 subscribers already, and didn't seem to be slowing down anytime soon. We received a dozen DMs from other creators asking to collaborate or to ask us for the location of the school. But one DM stuck out in particular. It was from an individual named Josh. He was insistent on getting information about the girl we saw. Josh, hey guys, my name is Josh Redacted. I just saw your video, and I know this may sound odd, but I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions about the girl. It's urgent. His message made me curious, so I agreed. Sure. What do you want to know about her? Josh, did you happen to see her eyes? If so, what color were they? I didn't really get a good look at them. It was too dark in there. Josh, how about her right forearm? Did you see a scar shaped like a dog bite on her arm? I didn't remember much about her arm, so I looked back at the footage. I start by re-watching when she leapt at me in the computer lab. That's when I noticed something. I didn't drop the camera. She knocked it out of my hands when she jumped at me. I could clearly see her hand hitting the camera, and it was the same arm Josh asked about. I took a closer look at her arm and saw she did indeed have a dog bite-shaped scar. I sent another message to Josh. Yes, she does have a scar on her arm. How did you know that? Josh, I thought that was her. Please, you need to tell me the location of the school. I can meet you somewhere if you don't trust me. I'm not telling you anything more until you tell me how you knew about her scar. Josh, okay, fine. I know about her scar because I think the girl you saw in the school is my missing sister. There is a photo attached to the message. I opened it and saw a missing person poster. The girl on the poster looks exactly like the girl I saw in the school that night. Her name is Lucy, redacted, and she went missing 9 months ago from a nearby county. I replied to Josh immediately with my phone number and gave him the location of the school. He told me he doesn't live too far from here, and we agreed to meet at my apartment tonight and then go to the police with our findings. I stand outside the school once again with Josh, Todd, and Dan, but this time the school is bathed in flashing red and blue lights as the sun is setting behind it. The school is surrounded by what appears to be every police officer and EMT in town. The officers breached the school just moments ago, and we were told to wait in the parking lot. Josh made it into town earlier this evening. As soon as he came into my apartment, I knew he was telling the truth. I could see it in his eyes. They looked just like Lucy's. We skipped all formalities as he told me all the details of her disappearance. After I answered all of Josh's questions, we went to the police station. We told the story to the officer at the front desk. Officer Anderson didn't seem to be convinced with our ghost girl in the school story until I showed him the video and Josh pulled out the missing persons poster. Anderson put on his glasses to get a closer look at the girl and saw that we were serious. He showed our proof to some of the nearby officers. They unanimously agreed to start an investigation. Then a couple hours later, we arrived here. We weren't technically invited to join the investigation, but no one stopped us either. We sat in the parking lot for what felt like the entire night, but according to my watch, it has been only 45 minutes. The sun is fully set by now, and the night sky is beginning to take over. Finally, the front doors opened. One of the officers exited the building with his arm around Lucy. Josh ran up to her as fast as he could, without frightening her. Lucy watched him tensely until she recognized him. Then she smiled and fell into his arms. He said something to her, but I was out of earshot, and I didn't want to intrude. The front doors opened again, and 2 more officers walked out, holding a couple of young girls in their arms. The girls are gauntly thin. They look sickly, but are alive nonetheless. The officers rushed them over to the ambulance. Todd pointed me to the front doors again, and I saw 3 more officers rush out with girls in their arms as well. I overheard the 2 officers talking to the EMTs. There are a couple more girls inside yet. Anderson is working on getting them free right now. 1 teen and 1 adult. These girls were chained upstairs in the elementary art room. The other officer pointed to Lucy and said that girl gave us quite the scare in there. She was the only girl not chained up. She said she escaped her chains last week and hit a bad man with a brick, but she hasn't seen him since. The 3 other officers approached the ambulances, setting the girls on the available gurneys, and asked how they could help. An officer named Lincoln turned to us and told us he's going to take Lucy back to the station to treat her there and see what else she is willing to tell us tonight. Josh and I agreed to come with. By morning, a lot of my questions became answered. Lucy was very open about her experiences in the school. She was very brave, with encouragement from her big brother Josh. She started by telling us that she tried to hurt Charlie with a brick because he was a bad man, but she couldn't hit him hard enough, and he dragged her back upstairs. That was the night that Charlie got into a car accident. Lincoln is going to look further into the autopsy, but suspects Lucy gave him a concussion, and that caused him to veer off the road as he was driving to the hospital. Eventually, Lucy was able to escape her chains again, but couldn't escape the west wing since the doors were locked and the windows were boarded up. I felt pretty bad for closing the doors behind me as we fled that night. She also told us that Charlie has been kidnapping the girls from nearby towns. Lincoln pointed out that most of the girls rescued from the school are in the missing persons databases of neighboring counties. He showed the database to Lucy, and she was able to point out a few more girls that used to be at the school, but were picked up by another bad man. She said he comes from the south to pick up the girls who don't behave. I told Lincoln about the man who was listed as Charlie's next of kin that Todd mentioned last week. Lincoln pulled up the man's information and found his photo. He showed the photo to Lucy. She cried, but confirmed it was him. His name is Arnold, redacted, and he even looked like a creep. He should have made it into town by now, according to my conversation with Todd. Lincoln had his doubts that he would show at all, but said they would keep trying to reach him until he is caught. Later, when the IT department went through the computer in Charlie's office and they validated what Lucy said, they found hundreds of messages between Charlie and Arnold that revealed a bigger trafficking ring led by Arnold. At that point, they turned the case over to the FBI for a large-scale operation. That was the last of Officer Lincoln's questioning. Then the on-site nurse gave Lucy a quick evaluation. Lucy said she felt fine, so the nurse told her to get plenty of rest over the next few days and drink plenty of water. Lucy asked about the other girls in the school. The nurse said they're all going to be okay and that the officers are reaching out to their parents now. Finally, Lincoln said, "We are free to leave, but we have to stay in town until the investigation is complete." I extended an offer to Josh and Lucy to stay at my place for a few days, which they accepted. We left the department grateful for all they have done, but hopeful we wouldn't have to return anytime soon. We arrived at my apartment before noon. Before I could even offer my bedroom to Lucy, she was asleep on the couch. Josh fell asleep on the recliner adjacent to her, unwilling to leave her side. I left 2 glasses of water on the coffee table with a note telling them to help themselves to anything in the kitchen. I walked into my bedroom and turned on my computer. Officer Lincoln told me to delete the video of the school for the remainder of the investigation. I wasn't sure how long that would be, so I began writing my experiences here while the memories and emotions are still fresh. Surprisingly, my YouTube channel no longer feels as important. I have new friends to care for now, along with my old ones. Maybe a break from ghost hunting will do me good, because I certainly found more than I was hoping to. So that's all for now, dubious ghost viewers. Until next time. Thank you. Story 3. I get paid to cry at people's funerals. I know it sounds strange, maybe even grotesque, but when you're an out-of-work actress in Texas, strange pay is better than waiting tables. I didn't start out thinking this would be my life. There was a time I was chasing auditions, doing regional theater, TV commercials, or the occasional student film. I thought I could make it. But after a year of silence, of waiting by the phone, of hoping for a call that never came, my savings ran out. I had to move home, and that's when a Craigslist ad found me. Mourners wanted. Must show emotion on cue. Cash paid the same day. I showed up at Kendry & Sons funeral services not knowing what to expect. The building was squat and brick, tucked between a payday loan office and a shuttered convenience store. The neon sign outside buzzed weakly, the kind of flicker that makes your eyes hurt. There weren't any sons. Just Kendry, a thin, gaunt man with skin like parchment, gray eyes that never quite focused, and a smell of bleach and smoke that seemed to cling to him. He didn't smile. He didn't ask me questions. He just handed me a folded sheet with the time of the service and said, "You show up, you cry, you don't ask questions." Families want to feel their loved one mattered. That's where you come in. The first funeral was awkward. A woman in her 70s. Cancer. Her children gathered around, whispering to one another, hugging her pictures, patting the casket. I sat near the front, holding a tissue, trying not to overdo it, trying to get the crying right without looking ridiculous. My chest ached, and the tears came slowly at first, then faster, until my face was damp and my hand was shaking from holding the tissue. It felt wrong, but also strangely satisfying. I was helping in a small way, making the grief feel fuller, less empty. It was a long first day, but as we were wrapping up, Kendry handed me an envelope of cash. I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. After a few more funerals, I started getting used to the rhythm. Arrive, stand near the front, sit, dab at my eyes, offer comfort when a family member comes close. People thank me politely, sometimes with a hug, sometimes with a hand on my shoulder. I didn't know the deceased, but that didn't matter. I didn't ask questions. Kendry never did. Some days it still felt wrong. My chest would tighten when I saw the casket, or when someone's wailing echoed down the small hall. Sometimes I felt like I shouldn't be there at all, like an intruder in someone else's grief. But most of the time, the money was enough to drown that feeling out. I started noticing things, not about the funerals themselves, but about the routine. How Kendry moved quietly between rooms, checking the schedule, adjusting flowers, making notes. How the same cleaning crew appeared early every morning, sweeping and dusting, even when no one had requested it. And then there was the man. Tall, thin, always standing across the street, just beyond the windows, smoking or shifting his weight from foot to foot. He never came inside. He never spoke, just watched. I tried to tell myself he was a neighbor or just some loner, but he was there again and again. I started paying him less attention. I had to focus on the crying, the tissues, the comfort. It was exhausting. The hours were long, the rooms warm and still, the smell of flowers heavy in the air. I began to sink into the routine, almost forgetting the man outside entirely. Weeks passed. The pattern continued. I was getting used to the motions, the faces, the quiet expectations. Some funerals were chaotic, messy, and loud. Others were quieter, smaller. But I didn't think much about it. I did my job. I cried. I offered comfort. I took the money. There were people from all walks of life at these funerals. There were rangers, judges, athletes. Heck, even some worked in the circus. But I'll never forget meeting a doctor. A few polite words, nothing dramatic. But he was so slick, so well-spoken. I remembered his handsome face like it was my job. Something about him felt too precise, too calm. But I didn't think much of it. A week later, I saw him again, on a television commercial for Arby's, grinning. Perfect teeth. Same face, same voice. I froze. My stomach dropped. He'd been at the funeral, crying politely, offering condolences, sitting there like a part of the family. He wasn't a doctor. He was just like me, an actor. If he had been pretending, that meant everyone else in that sparse room could have been paid to be there as well. I went back through every strange funeral in my head. The stiff body language, the rehearsed lines, the way nobody ever asked who I was or who anyone else was. That's when it hit me. Some funerals were entirely fake. Every person in the room, an actor. The bodies were real, but the grief was staged. The next few days, I went to work as usual, but the fake funerals kept running through my head. Something about them didn't sit right. I found myself watching the guests more closely, noting little details I'd ignored before. The way some of them exchanged glances when they thought no one was looking, the way the caskets were always sealed, the way Kendry's hands lingered on the lids just a second too long. I started checking the names online. Obituaries, GoFundMe pages, social media. Nothing. It was like these people had never existed outside the funeral home. Then I noticed the tall man again, standing in his usual corner across the street, watching, not observing the funeral home in general. He was watching those particular services, the quiet ones with only a handful of attendees. His attention was focused, precise, and slowly, piece by piece, it dawned on me. He wasn't a neighbor. He wasn't a distant relative. He was the reason the funerals existed. The quiet services, the missing records, Kendry's meticulous handling of the bodies, all of it revolved around him. The tall man had killed the people in those caskets. That's why no one else knew them. That's why the grief had to be manufactured. He wanted the ritual for himself. And Kendry? Kendry was his enabler, paid to take care of the bodies, to prepare the cremations, to keep the rest of the world from asking questions. My stomach turned. Every tear I had shed, every comforting word I had offered, every tissue I had dabbed to my eyes, it had been part of his game, part of his sick ritual. I realized then that I had been playing my part in a killer's theater, and that the man outside wasn't just watching. He was orchestrating it all, enjoying it from his vantage point across the street, entirely removed from the rest of the world. I quit the next morning, told Kendry I couldn't do it anymore. He didn't argue, just gave me a flat smile, like he'd been waiting for me to say it. I'm going to the cops tomorrow. Go to fix this all up. But tonight's been strange. I feel like I've heard strange noises coming from outside my place. A few times, I could swear I even saw the tall man. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't scared. I'm just worried I know what comes next. They'll have to hire actors to cry for me. Story 4. I've been a doctor for 30 years. I quit today. At the very outset, I must apologize. I'm not very familiar with this platform, but I talked to my son, and after a good few hours of refusing to believe me, he thinks I should go on the internet with my story. As a warning, we didn't have all these computers when I was young, and words still travel just fine, but I guess the world has changed. Up until today, I was a doctor. A damn good one, if I say so myself. I have the biggest goddamn E&E practice in the next 5 states, and I'm proud of it. I was at any rate. Now I've just lit a cigarette on the final, smoldering chars of my degree. It's a whole load of bullshit anyway. No man who's seen anything like I've seen would have any faith left in those authoritative medical textbooks. It all began, you see, at exactly 10:30 when the private line of my upscale Sector V clinic began ringing. If I had been just a little bit luckier and a little less stupid, I would have ignored it like on any other day. I have strict principles. I don't take appointments after 9, and I don't see patients after 11. It's how I kept my marriage intact. You didn't disrespect my clock. If it was urgent, too bad. If it were an emergency, find someone else. Everyone who worked with me knew that. I was a goddamn super specialist. I was not going to run around on midnight calls like some junior resident. That's why my secretary ignored the line the first time, and the second, and the third, even though the ringing somehow grew louder each time. Then, just as I was planning to call a night, my chamber intercom clicked and turned green. The line had been patched through. Ranjana, I barked through the door to my chamber. I've told you not to. I didn't. She appeared at the door, nervously tugging at her skirt, eyes wide. It didn't even ring this time. I don't know how it got routed to you. You must have hit the wrong button. Even as I said it, I knew it was unlikely. Ranjana had been with me for 8 years. She didn't make mistakes, let alone stupid ones. Well, since it's already here, I moved to press the button to receive the call, but before I could, the speaker crackled to life of its own accord. Dr. Sharma, can you hear me? The voice was staticky, flickering in and out like we were not over a landline, but on a satellite phone in the middle of a rainstorm. There was so little fidelity that I could hardly tell what the person on the other end sounded like. Yes, hello? Hello. I said the second hello a little louder, hoping to cut through whatever strange interference was plaguing the line. I didn't even know why I was trying so hard to break my own rule. I suppose, even after all these years, I am a professional first. All right, we're through. They were talking to someone on their end. Now that the line had cleared up slightly, I could tell it was a man. Dr. Sharma, I hope I'm not bothering you too much, but we have someone we would like to get checked out. As soon as possible. I sighed. As expected. Look, mister. He didn't volunteer his name. I don't take appointments at this hour. If you need to come in, call us in the morning, and my secretary will give you a date and a time. I must warn you, we have a backlog. This is an emergency, doctor. It positively cannot wait. Then you should have set an appointment earlier. Call my office tomorrow, please. Good night. I'm moved to cut the line. It's very urgent. Are you sure I cannot persuade you? The voice on the other end was polite, even deferential, but there was a hint of steel behind it that stayed in my hand. What kind of urgency? I said despite myself. It's a close friend of mine, you see. Nothing life-threatening, but he seems to have completely lost his voice. Perfectly all right otherwise, but he's completely mute. Mute? I asked, some forgotten curiosity rising within me. Do you mean his voice is broken? Hoarse? No, doctor. There was a sting of triumph in his tune. He's completely silent. Not a peep. As if he didn't have a mouth at all. And nothing else wrong with him? Nothing. Healthy as a horse. Then I see no reason he shouldn't be able to wait until morning. Ordinarily, you would be right. But there are urgent events he has to attend that require him to be able to speak. We need him seen tonight, and there's no better doctor in the city than you. I rubbed my forehead, raising a quizzical brow at Ranjana. She shrugged helplessly. I had never broken my rule. On the other hand, the case was, money's no object, if that's your concern. His tone was light and breezy, almost dismissive, as if he couldn't believe that was even in question. Is that so? What's your consultation fee, Dr. Sharma? I opened my mouth to answer, but he cut me off. It doesn't matter. All you need to know is it's more money than you'll see in your life for seeing a walk-in patient at a clinic. Significantly more. Despite myself, I bristled. How cheap did he think I was? It has 6 zeros, he added helpfully, as if reading my mind. All of that for one single consultation. It shouldn't take a skilled professional like you more than 15 minutes. What do you say, sir? Ranjana whispered, her tone some mix of warning and trepidation. I silenced her with a knowing look. She wasn't wrong. Something in my gut told me I was being paid to see something no one else would. But I told myself it didn't matter. Fuck curiosity. Curiosity is for students. I was a professional. I just had to diagnose a mute man and go home with enough money to build a second house in Goa. Your friend must be really desperate, I said, trying not to blurt out my shock. We need this solved, with minimum delay. Off the books. Are you in or are you out, doctor? Looking back, that is the moment any reasonable man should have walked away. No one gives that much away for essentially peanuts. If they are, they're usually buying significantly more than what you think you're selling. Instead, I looked at the clock. 10. I still had an hour before I had to get home. Technically, before my wife started cribbing. How long could it take? Fine, I said tersely. When can your friend come in? I could almost hear the smile in his voice. Oh, don't worry about it, Dr. Sharma. My friends are already there. Right on cue. I heard the clinic door swing open. The line clicked and went dead on my desk. Ranjana read my glance immediately, rushing out to greet them. There was the sound of heavy boots against the hard floor, 3 or 4 of them by my guess. But there was something else right alongside them, a chill that settled into the room as the door swung closed, prickling up my spine. Out of habit more than anything else, I checked the air conditioning. Still at the usual settings. I rose from my seat, an inexplicable, heavy sense of foreboding coiling around my heart, telling me I was making a mistake, telling me to send them away. I ignored it. The money was too good. The fucking money. The first one that caught my eye was the leader of the pack, a man with a brown, metallic complexion, hair slicked back expertly into a part my own grandmother would approve of. May she rest in peace. His suit looked remarkably expensive, the kind that would burn holes even in my pockets, which I supposed explained the willingness to pay. Even as he approached me, his mouth splitting into a perfectly rehearsed smile, the air in the room began to grow pungent with ozone, like the calm before a thunderclap. Flanking him on either side, a few steps behind, were two others, one male and one female. Unlike their companion, they were dressed almost too casually, ratty, sagging t-shirts and faded jeans. Their faces were uncovered, but every time I tried to focus on them, my eyes would instantly slide off and onto something else like slipping on black ice. Even what few details I could glimpse dissolved almost as soon as they entered my mind. All I could comprehend was an ever-shifting mirage, an unsolvable puzzle where their visage should be. Standing between them was another man, a foreign tourist, by the look of it. He was wearing a faded and stained sky-blue shirt, a silver cross glittering darkly on his collar. His dirty blonde beard was long and unkempt, matched by the mop on his head. Though he was able to stand by himself, his forehead was slick with sweat, his eyes half-lidded as he tried not to nod off. Dr. Sharma. The man in the suit approached first, wearing a well-rehearsed polite expression as he extended his hand. Thank you so much for seeing us at such short notice. I want you to know we are all very grateful. You must be. We are the associates your caller mentioned. Yes. I took his hand. I thought he said you were friends, Mr. Elias. His grin did not waver, his grip firm as he shook. You can call me Elias. And yes, he does like to think of us all as friends, doesn't he? But, just between you and me, I prefer to keep it a little more professional. I see. Well, no use getting involved in that. Instead, I crossed over to the man they had dragged in. I assume this is your patient. What gave it away? Elias chuckled at his own joke, adjusting his suit. Well, where do you want him, Doc? We can wait outside, or take a walk, if that's what you want. After escorting him all the way here, they were just fine with leaving me alone with their friend. Nevertheless, working would be easier without three people breathing down my neck and asking questions. You can step outside if you want, I said diplomatically, but I would appreciate it if we had the room. Understood. Elias nodded. People, let's give the good doctor his space. I'm stepping out. Got to smoke, the man said. As an ENT specialist, I hated smoking. As a chain smoker myself, I sympathized perfectly. Besides, I had something else to worry about. He's just spoken, no doubt about it. However, even though the sound passed through my ears and I remembered every word he had said, I already had no recollection of what he sounded like. Not a single detail. Not a pitch, not a cadence. Not even the language. There was a gaping void in my memory where his voice should have been. You sure you can handle this, Doc? Elias asked, his eyes slightly narrowed as he read my expression. You look a little flustered. Long day. I'm fine, I said quickly, reflexively. Admitting fatigue was a bad idea, commercially and legally, in my profession. I can take him from here. Can I go? The man asked again, urgently. Go ahead. Elias gave me another smile. We'll be outside, Dr. Sharma, just in case you need anything. Then he walked over to their patient, patting his cheek like an affectionate father. Don't worry, kiddo. He's the best doctor for the next 5 states. If anyone can fix you up, it's him. A few seconds later, we were alone. Wordlessly, I gestured to my patient to take a seat. What's your name? It was more for politeness' sake than anything else, though it would be nice to know if the muteness was merely psychological. No answer. Predictable. How long have you been in India? You don't look local. Did you come here on holiday? The questions were more to fill the silence than anything else as I rifled around among my tools. I caught Ranjana's eye through the door. She had taken her seat at her desk. Whatever else, she was never professional. Something unspoken passed between us, a language cultivated over the years. Keep the equipment running, just in case. They were paying good money, obscene money. The implication of that was clear. I had to find an answer, no matter what. Now that we were alone, I was beginning to notice more details about him. His breaths were coming short and shallow, chest heaving like a pigeon's, though he didn't look very distressed by it. His blinking was out of sync, The left, I a few moments late to blink. And the smell. I had a faint memory of it from my medical school days. A smell I found so disconcerting that it was the single most important factor for me to pick medicine over surgery. Old, stale blood. I frowned, mind racing to find explanations even as my hands gathered the necessary equipment. The asynchronous blinking, shortness of breath. Vasovagal response? Nervous issues? Maybe he tried to take some shoddy drugs at some obscure village music festival? Common enough in Arunachal or Meghalaya, and the tourists always pass through Bengal on the way back. The dealers knew this. But the smell? A sharp rap on the window. Both of us jumped at the sound. The man's eyes followed mine. A jet-black crow was perched on the windowsill outside, head turned aside to look straight into the room. Its eyes were big, too big for any bird of its kind I'd seen, pupils round and aware. Intelligence glinted behind them. Almost as if it had been waiting for me to look, it deliberately wrapped its beak on the window again and then again. I could not understand what it wanted. To come in? A clatter drew my attention back to my patient. His resigned demeanor had been replaced with a strange, unnatural excitement. His eyes were wide as he stared at the bird, breath coming ragged and fast as he shuffled to get as far away from the window as he could without getting up. The fear in his eyes was raw, animal. Whatever that thing was, he knew it. It knew him. I looked back at it. It met my gaze head-on, its baleful eye growing and growing and growing until it swallowed the whole room. I was a speck of dust before its massive pupil, its glare boring into me. Cold waves ran through my body. It was scanning, thinking, questioning, and I did not know how to answer it. Seconds stretched into hours, my muscles petrified before the intensity of this little bird. And then, before I knew it, the moment passed. It cawed once, as any other bird would, spread its wings, and disappeared into the darkness outside. "Doctor?" The voice pulled me back to the door, where Elias's head was sticking through the crack. "Everything all right?" We heard a little commotion. The bird. Elias did not sound incredulous. Rather, he sounded a little irritated, like he had just been informed of the arrival of an unwelcome guest. "Is this bird still there?" "No." I caught myself before I could get more upset. "Well, never mind. It's all right. We were just a little startled. I will begin with the examination now." Elias gave me a polite smile. "Of course, Dr. Sharma. Once again, if you need anything." He left the implication hanging, closing the door behind him. The man was still wide-eyed, craning his neck to look beyond me, confirming if we were truly alone. I understood the feeling, but I could not have him fidgeting for the rest of the inspection. "It's gone, sir. Please try to sit still." I raised the inspection table to the appropriate height. "I'm going to make a physical examination of your throat now, just to see if there is any visible problem. Is that all right?" He hesitated for a second, and then nodded. "Okay, good." I snapped on my gloves with practiced ease. I first started outside, palpating his neck. There was no obvious inflammation or irregularity. No swelling, no bumps, no excessive throbbing or heat. In fact, there was little heat at all. His skin was cold, like touching a sheet of metal left in snow overnight. Even the thin sheen of sweat was almost ice-cold, seeping through the gloves and numbing my fingers. This cold and still sweating? He did not look uncomfortable, but even so, the man on the phone had said he was healthy as a horse. Either he had been grossly misinformed, or he had been lying to my face. That was expected to a certain degree. But this... I shook my head. Better to concentrate on what I could control. There did not seem to be any external evidence of inflammation, tumors, or infections. Nothing that was serious enough to be noticed through the skin, at any rate. I needed to have a direct look to rule it out fully. "Open your mouth, please, sir. As wide as you can go." I grabbed a torch and a tongue depressor from my tray, clearing a visible path. Despite the harsh light, his pupils remained unmoving, refusing to contract even though he was clearly uncomfortable with the brightness. "You can close your eyes," I whispered, concentrating on his throat. He needed more than an ENT specialist to see him. I was half tempted to call up a few of my friends for a referral, but I had been asked for discretion. Whether that extended to other medical professionals, I did not know, and I did not want to risk finding out the hard way. When people were willing to pay that much, it wasn't just about privacy. Losing the money was the least of your concerns. Disobeying instructions could land you in a ditch. Or worse, even under direct inspection, his throat looked perfect. Too perfect. Not a single blemish, aberration, or benign growth. Not even minute scarring from wear. It was immaculate. It looked like my patient had walked straight out of the ideal diagram in my anatomy textbook. No real person's body looked like that. It was as if he had never spoken, caught a cold, or even coughed too hard in his entire life. How old was he? Above 20, at least? That was impossible. I flicked off the torch, trying to keep my confusion from my voice. You can't talk? At all. The man shook his head. What about sounds? Can you sigh? Cough? Shout? The man blinked. He hadn't tried yet. Why don't you go ahead and try to cough for me then? I hoped he knew what coughing was, given the pristine condition of his throat. He nodded and coughed lightly. It sounded normal. No gurgling or scratchiness. That ruled out mucus buildup, though I hadn't seen any in the first place. He coughed again, a little harder this time. It's okay, sir, you can stop now, I said, reaching for my next instrument. He coughed again, doubling over this time. Sir, his coughs grew in intensity until he was shaking and thrashing in place, each retching cough racking his whole body with spasms. Ranjana, I called out, straightening him up. Water. Now. As he coughed, something black and viscous began to pour out of his mouth, bubbling with intermixed spit and mucus. It came without relief, first in nasty globules and then in a thick stream, staining his shirt and splattering onto the floor. The smell of blood lingering around him intensified until I was forced to cover my face with my sleeve to stop myself from gagging. This close, it was joined by others. The raw smell of overburnt incense, the pungent odor of burning hair, and sickening mildew. Then just as suddenly it stopped. He gasped, taking long, shaky breaths, looking at the tar-like substance now covering the floor and his clothes. It's all right. Happens more often than you'd know, I lied. We'll get it cleaned up. He nodded slightly, clearly not believing me. Well, I had to press on if only to finish up in time and get back home. Why don't you drink that water, and then I'll take a direct look at your larynx. Ranjana, true to her usual punctuality, arrived within a few seconds, face fixed in studied disinterest. She lowered the tray with a glass of water before my patient. He drank in grateful, needy gulps, eyes darting about in some mixture of shame and fear. We stepped aside, giving him his privacy as best we could. What's that mess, sir? She whispered under her breath. It all came out of him. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms, and tried to study him without glaring. That much. She looked wide-eyed at the floor. Is it blood? No, it wasn't. That smell didn't come from the sludge. It was coming straight from him, oozing from every pore. Then what is it? I have no idea. She glanced at me, surprised. It was the first, and now probably last, time she had heard me admit I did not know something. We should get a sample of it. It's contaminated now, but it'll have to do. This needs to go to a lab as soon as possible, I said, falling back into the safety of professionalism. I think we'll need to see this patient a few more times. She nodded. Yes, sir. Even as I looked at it, the thick, gelatinous globules wriggled against the floor, refusing to stay still, as if they were trying to crawl away, as if they were alive. Yes, I had never seen something like this before, and, the gods help me, I never wanted to see it again. The man finished his water, looking around for a place to set the glass down. Ranjana took it from him, flashing a measured smile of hospitality. Are you ready to continue? I asked, trying to make my voice as gentle as I could. We can take a few minutes. He shook his head. Very well. I crossed back over to the tray, keeping up the appearance of control. Now, we're going to take a direct look at your larynx. Your voice box, that is. I held up my laryngoscope, letting him take a look at it as I got it hooked up to my monitor. Normally, I didn't bother, but the more upper-class clients liked the show, the illusion that they knew what was going on. I'm going to insert this through your nostril and down your throat. You may feel a little uncomfortable, but it will pass. It has a camera that will allow me to take a direct look at your vocal folds, see if there is anything physical going on. When he didn't protest, I fell back into practice procedural ritualism administering a light topical anesthetic before guiding the tube in through his nose. He made a half-hearted attempt to sneeze, but stayed otherwise still as I watched the video feed. His nostrils looked normal, with no inflammation or mucus present to signal an infection. In less than a minute, I was through, reflexes and experience taking over as I deftly entered the throat and proceeded downwards towards my destination. The pharynx passed us by, looking as pristine and perfect as it had visually. Just a little more, and I would have the vocal folds in sight. As I rounded the last fold, a crackling sound sent ripples of distortion through the monitor feed. The sound grew like miniature lightning inside the machine. Then, the feed was cut out, replaced by darkness. I frowned. This machine wasn't anywhere close to giving out like this. It was less than a year old. No, the monitor hadn't turned off. It was still powered, responsive. The laryngoscope was transmitting its feed just fine. It was merely looking at nothing. Perhaps just the torch had given out? Then, the darkness began to shift, vague outlines melting out from the black void. Shifting, moving. The vocal folds? No, that looked nothing like a larynx, even from what little I could see. I fiddled with the controls, trying to get the torch working again. Unfortunately, it did. The light flicked on, bathing the patient's throat once more. Right before the camera, a black, bulbous mass writhed, tentacle-like projections wrapped tightly around the tissue. It had no features whatsoever, except for the occasional tar-like bubbling, sending ripples across its undulating surface. No features except a mouth, a wide grin, human-like teeth jutting straight into the camera. Its eyeless stare began climbing, back up the fiber optic. Terrible instinct crawled on my skin like a warning. It breached the monitor, somehow, looking through something that could not look. It was looking. It was looking at me. With a cry of surprise, I let go of the laryngoscope, staggering back, almost tipping over my chair in the process. It almost slipped out, dragging roughly across the soft tissues of the throat and nose before the man caught its heavy end with a strangled grunt of pain. I panted, skin flushing with heat and adrenaline. The AC was still humming, but I was sweating like the room had turned tropical. My skin prickled. My shirt clung to my back. I stared wide-eyed at the monitor. The feed had actually cut out this time, only to flick back on a few moments later. The camera was looking straight at the man's larynx. A normal larynx, except that it was too perfect, too clean, like everything else in there. Like something was disguising itself with the healthiest image it knew. "Doctor," I heard Elias's voice from outside. "I'm fine," I called back, staring at the image. "We're fine." No, not a single trace remained of anything out of the ordinary. I wiped the sweat off my face, rubbing my eyes. Was it fatigue? Had I been sleeping too little after all? Maybe binging those shows every night wasn't a good idea after all, no matter what my wife said. I fixed my patient with the firmest stare I could. "What exactly happened to you? Tell me. Leave no detail out." He looked at me helplessly. I grabbed my pad and a pen from the desk. "Right. I need your history. Can't make a diagnosis without it." He nodded, taking the pen from me. I flipped the pad to a blank page and held it out. He touched the pen and scratched the first line. Then, the pen clattered from his shaking grip, followed shortly by the pad as they landed in the black mess on the floor. He cried out in pain, cradling his hand as the fingers shook and contorted, bending backwards until I was afraid they would tear themselves out of their sockets. If he hadn't been so young and mostly fine up till now, I would have pegged him with palsy on the spot. Something nervous, then. It had to be. It had to be something else. Anything else other than what I had seen. Never mind, then. There's one last test we have to do. I retrieved the appropriate machine from the tangle in the corner. I would have to have a word with the cleaner about organizing that. An electromyography. He gave me a quizzical look. "Some things never change. It will let me measure electrical activity in your muscles." I quickly withdrew the laryngoscope, wheeling it away with perhaps a little more urgency than I had to. "I have a suspicion that your problem is related to nerves, since I can see nothing physically wrong." Well, that was a lie. Your vocal folds may not be getting the correct signals from your brain, or any signals at all. That might be why you can make sounds, but no complex speech. I held up a hand to forestall the next question on impulse. It's minimally invasive. Don't worry. It wasn't about the money. Not anymore. I needed to know I was sane. I showed him the electrodes. I just need to insert these into your throat externally. He sighed, his expression resigned. He did not believe I could help him. To tell the truth, I wasn't sure either. But he made no move to refuse, so I continued. This time, I did not administer any anesthetic. I needed the electrical activity to be as clean as possible, just in case. As soon as the monitor flicked on, my questions were both answered and increased. The electromyogram was dead, completely dead, not a hint of electrical activity present anywhere. It was never completely dead. That would mean, can you try to speak? I asked just to make sure. Humor me. He strained. Still no activity on the display. I sighed, moving to switch it off. Weird or not, I had my answer. Then the graph moved. Within seconds, where there was nothing before, there was now frantic activity. Lines and spikes going everywhere and nowhere, erratic and impossible. Nerves could not carry signals like this. Every hint of medical knowledge I had went against it. And yet it was happening. A miniature thundercloud was raging inside my patient's throat, painting the monitor with hints of its power. The lights in the clinic flickered, as if the electricity was overwhelming the circuitry, traveling back through the computer and into the room around me. I rose from my chair, opening my mouth to say something. With one final, blinding flash, every light in the room detonated, sending sprays of glass everywhere. I ducked, covering my head with my arms as small shards pattered against my clothes. In an instant, we were cast into blinding darkness, the ghostly glow of the electromyogram the only source of any illumination. Someone banged on the door, tried to open it. It did not budge. In the darkness, I felt something moving along it, something heavy, holding it in place with its bulk. The monitor continued flickering, casting dancing shadows that shrouded more than they revealed. I looked at it again, despite every instinct screaming not to. That's not, I murmured. That's not how it works. Neural impulses don't transmit. The spikes were converging, melting into each other, forming something coherent. Forming words, scrawled across the screen with impossible physics. The price is paid. Leave it alone. He is mine. I wanted to look away. Everything in me screamed not to. My legs begged to run, but I stared transfixed like a lab rat watching its own autopsy. Then, the letters were melting, crashing into each other, twisting and rolling, stretching into a smile. A ghostly, terrible smile, drawn in impulses. A sharp crack split the air. It came from my patient. Something was dragging its way out of his mouth, jaw breaking out of its hinges as it was stretched impossibly wide. His eyes lolled back into the back of his skull, the cornea glowing with an eerie light as his tormentor revealed himself. Its long, serpentine body uncoiled, black and slippery, growing in girth every second as it dragged itself along the floor, along the walls, along the ceiling. Surrounding, suffocating, drawing ever closer. Then it was facing me. The head of the beast smiled, its body pulsing everywhere around me. I was in a room made of it, any hint of my clinic long since gone. Its mouth split into a grin. Then it opened and the thing spoke. Its voice was deep, gravelly, sending tremors of weakness through my legs. You are wasting your time, doctor. He has sinned, and he has atoned. There is nothing for you to heal. It is late. Go home. Be with your family. The threat was clear. Before it was decided I couldn't. With a crash, the door burst open. Quicker than I could blink, the monster withdrew, like a rubber band snapping back into place as it crawled back into its host. His jaw snapped back into place, just as the torchlight from the doorway blinded me. Elias and his companions shone their torches into the room, flicking from me to the patient and then back again. Beyond them, the lights of the waiting area glowed with their usual pleasant, dim light. Are you all right, sir? Sir! Ranjana pushed past them, stepping gingerly over the glass on the ground as she hurried to me. What the hell happened here? I didn't answer. Couldn't. my voice betraying me as I slumped into the nearest chair, shying away from the probing light of the torches. "Dr. Sharma?" Elias frowned. "Are you injured?" I managed to shake my head. "And your patient?" I looked up as the torch flickered on his face. He did not look afraid. No, we were far beyond that. He was numb, catatonic, eyes as wide as they could go as he stared out into nothing, barely breathing. But he was alive. Elias hummed in approval. Well, I said slowly. "What's your diagnosis, Dr. Sharma? Or did you forget what we were here for?" I buried my face in my hands. "After everything that just happened, that is your first question?" "Well, you look fine," the woman said, crossing her arms. "Of course." I took a shaky breath. There's something inside him. I can't solve this. It threatened me. It came out of his mouth, and it threatened me. It knew me. It knew everything. It said he had sinned, and he had to atone. It was... I looked up, no longer able to hide my vitriol. "There's a monster." "A monster?" "That's my diagnosis, sir. Your patient has, or is a monster." Ranjana's expression was openly terrified now, even as she used her handkerchief to wipe the perspiration from my brow as well as she could. "A monster," Elias repeated, his expression neutral. "A monster," I snapped, no longer caring. I didn't want the money. I didn't even know what I wanted. This wasn't science or medicine. It was mythology. It was madness. I just needed to get out of here. "Well, that makes sense." "What?" I jolted, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. Elias sighed, flashing me another one of his easy smiles. In the light from his torch, he looked ghostly, foreboding. "I'm afraid we haven't been entirely truthful with you, Dr. Sharma." Disappointment. It was more of a second opinion. We needed to be sure, absolutely sure that it wasn't simply medical. We needed you to make sure. "You knew? We have had an experience with pathology." "Yes," he said evasively. "And now, we know that the entity you saw is to blame. Thanks to you. You put my life in danger without telling me anything, so you could make sure," I said, bile and anger rising together up my throat with every recollection of that smiling electromyogram. "Well, you're a smart man, Dr. Sharma. Surely you didn't think we would be paying you that much simply to stick a camera in someone's nose." Elias chuckled. "Besides, we were sure, reasonably sure, that it would not harm you. Not unless you kept pushing. You wisely did not." I opened my mouth and then closed it again. "Well, our business here is concluded, Dr. Sharma. And look at that." Elias pointed a finger at the clock in the lobby. "Right on schedule. 11. On the dot." The bastard knew. He knew when I went home. They had been watching me, scouting me. Your wife," Elias interrupted, his grin growing a little sharper, "would be distraught if you tarried any further, doctor, as would be your beautiful children. And there is little that causes more delay in getting home than asking the wrong questions. Some of those delays could even be permanent." I glared at him, but my mouth snapped shut. I believed him. "Leave your office unlocked and the key on your desk." He resumed his easygoing tone. "Our cleanup crew will be along shortly. Nothing leaves this room, doctor. Not material and not words." "Understood." I nodded. "Then we have no quarrel." Elias bowed to me before turning to his soldiers. "Pick our preacher up, will you? We're leaving." As his men slid into motion, the lights flickered again and went out. For a second or two, we were in absolute darkness. When they came back on, the men were gone, as was my patient. It was as if we had been alone all this time, except for the mess they had made of my clinic. The only lingering sign of their existence was a nondescript black briefcase, placed deliberately on Ranjana's desk. "Sir," she whispered. This close, I could feel her shaking in fear. "Go home, Ranjana." I breathed, struggling to my feet, the after-effects of adrenaline making my breathing choppy. My heart thundered like a struggling petrol engine in my chest. I was getting old. Too old for this. I saw that now all at once. "Sir, go home," I repeated. "Go home and go to sleep. Forget this ever happened. And for the God's sake, tell no one." Without waiting for her to comply, I stumbled over to the briefcase, marshaling every ounce of willpower to prevent my legs from collapsing like jelly. The locks were keyed to 000. Unlocked. The clasps snapped open as soon as I touched them. Beneath the smooth lid were neatly tied bundles of rupee notes, 2,000 each, stacked to fill the entire space inside. I could estimate at a glance. There was enough to fulfill the promise. Maybe more. On top of the pile, there was a business card, blank except for a phrase in neat handwriting. Do not pursue this. After that, it was all a blur. The next thing I knew, I was closing my car door, walking up the stairs to my house. I dreamed up some answers for my wife somewhere along the way, though it was difficult to explain the briefcase in my white-knuckled grip. Even now, I can see it. In the corner. Waiting. Trust me, I'm going to use the money. I'm not that stupid. But as for the rest of it, I'm done. Done believing in the lies we stretch over the mouth of the world and call truth because it's convenient. Everything we think we know is a veil. I understand that today. And what's on the other side? I don't care to know. I don't want to know. But I do know this. I'm going to burn every medical textbook I have tonight. Maybe have a little bonfire too, while I'm at it. If you're a doctor, I encourage you to do the same. Why? Because that thing I saw in the room is the truth. The only truth of our world. Everything else? Lies. Elegant lies. Well-dressed lies. Authoritative lies. But lies. It's all lies. Story 5. I manage a house where every tenant disappears after 1 month. The third tenant was a pale guy, tattoos all over his arm, and a large piercing in his ear. He looked sick and walked slowly. He told me he wanted to live in that house to get over his past, and I didn't want to ask for details. What really caught him was the forest view from the porch. He signed a contract on the spot, and the very next day, his moving truck was parked in the garage. 2 weeks later, I realized I'd left my folder with some documents in the house and called the guy. No answer. I decided to drive out there and found the place empty, which was strange. He'd brought a lot of stuff during the move. His car wasn't in the garage, but I rang the bell anyway. Nothing. The door was unlocked, and I stepped inside, convinced something was wrong. But there was nothing to see. The house was empty, no furniture, dusty, just like it had been when I first showed it to him. A few months earlier, while eating breakfast, I got a call from a property owner who said she'd found me on Instagram. She told me she needed an experienced, fast-moving realtor to handle rental contracts for her house. And I lied, said I was that guy, even though I'd only had my license for a little over a year. Her voice was old, raspy, almost broken, like someone with throat problems. She said she lived abroad and needed someone local. I wouldn't even have to look for tenants. She pitched. There was already a list of people interested, and they'd meet me at the house. I wasn't too excited. It didn't sound like much of an opportunity until she mentioned my commission. I nearly choked on the sandwich I was eating. I repeated the number back to her, sure she'd made a mistake, but she insisted it was right. That amount would be handed to me, in cash, once the tenants signed and moved in. The only condition, she said, was that if a contract was broken due to my negligence or choice, I'd have to pay 1 month's rent. On paper, it didn't sound bad. I accepted right away. The next day, I went to see the property. It was huge, isolated, with no close neighbors. Inside, there were expensive wooden furniture pieces, sculptures, installations that must have cost a fortune. The porch opened up to a wide view of a forest. Big wooden chairs faced the woods, and the owner made a point of stressing that they could not be moved from their place. I imagined myself retired there, sipping coffee, birdwatching. Coincidentally, the first tenants were a retired couple escaping the chaos of the city. When they signed, I went home torn between excitement and anxiety. Would the owner really pay me that much? I was broke, but a few days later, a suitcase showed up on my doorstep with the full amount in cash. Stacks of $100 bills wrapped in rubber bands. Weird, yeah, but not weird enough to stop me from trading it in for a new car. About a month later, the owner called again. Said the couple didn't work out, and new tenants wanted to see the house that day. I didn't ask questions. Couldn't complain about another commission. This time it was 2 women, a couple. One was a writer who told me she'd chosen the place to work on her next novel. Signing was easy, and another suitcase of money arrived the same way. Life was good, but honestly, I barely had other clients. All my golden eggs were tied to this strange owner I barely knew. Her name and info looked fake. Still, with the new tenants in, I figured I wouldn't hear from her for a while. Wrong. Another month later, same story. The women had left. Another new tenant. I was happy, but suspicious. Why did everyone leave that house so quickly? Curiosity got me, so I called one of the last tenants. The number didn't exist anymore. I tried the old couple too. Same thing. After the third tenant, I tried to forget it. Not my problem. Who cared if they stayed or left? My fat commission was all I needed. Then, like clockwork, a month later, she called again. This time she sounded excited. Said the new clients were special, and she'd pay me double. I thought about asking questions, but the double was too good. That kind of money could help me put a down payment on an apartment. I drove to the house determined to sign as fast as possible. I got there early and snooped around. No sign of anyone ever living there. Not even a pin dropped during moving chaos. Nothing. When the bell rang, I opened the door to a young couple holding a newborn baby wrapped in a blanket. I showed them the house, my stomach churning at what I could be part of. And of course, they loved it. The dad talked about how his kid would grow up running in the fields, exploring the forest, the childhood he never had. They signed right away. My hands were shaking when I handed over the paper. The next day was supposed to be their move-in. I went home and couldn't sleep. Tossed and turned, thinking I might be helping some crime happen. Around 1 a.m., I gave up and drove back to the house. I needed to check everything with my own eyes. I searched every corner. Bedrooms, closets, everything. Nothing. But I'd seen 3 moving trucks unload here. Not a single mark on the floor. Impossible. I stepped onto the porch, resigned that I'd never figure it out. Sat on one of those big wooden chairs, thinking what I might have missed. That's when I saw it. Something shiny stuck in a crack in the chair. I pulled it out. It was a piercing, probably from the last tenant. On the needle was a small red stain. Blood. I reached into the crack again, feeling around, and touched something soft. I pulled it out. It was an ear. Darkened, rotten, with a torn hole where the piercing had been ripped out. I decided to push the chair to see what was underneath it, and with a lot of effort, I managed to move it a foot to the side. On the wooden floor, there was a symbol I couldn't recognize. Circles and shapes carved into the boards right under where the chair had been, like some sort of ritual. There were more traces of blood there. I froze, staring at it, heart pounding. What snapped me out of it was a laugh that came out of nowhere. A woman's laugh, echoing from the darkness of the forest. It started low and distant, but quickly grew louder, hysterical. Then more laughter followed, all of them female, all coming closer, aimed at me. It was like a whole crowd was hiding in those woods. The sound grew louder and louder, until my instincts took over. I bolted to my car, started it up, and sped down the road. The next day I called the couple and told them the deal was off. Made up some excuse. They weren't happy, but I didn't care. Soon after, the owner called me again. I didn't pick up and blocked her number, but the calls kept coming from all sorts of different numbers. I answered one, and it was her voice, angry. "You broke our pact. The rent will be collected at the end of the month." She kept repeating it, and I hung up every time. I went to the police. They went to the property, found nothing, then came back pissed because I had wasted their time. There were no ears, no marks, no nothing. Today is the 23rd, and next week the month ends. I keep wondering if I did the right thing, if maybe I should have just carried on with that commission. Every day that passes, I feel the panic building. My phone is always turned off, and I've rented a room in a roadside hotel outside the state. But even here, every night, I dream of that laugh. Story 6. I drive a tow truck on the night shift. Last week I got a call that made me fear the woods. I've been driving a tow truck for Morrison's Auto Recovery for 8 years now. Start on day shifts, but the night work pays better and there's less traffic to deal with. You get used to the weird hours, the drunk drivers who wrap their cars around telephone poles, the breakdowns on dark stretches of highway where cell service cuts out. It's honest work, and I'm good at it. Most calls are routine. Dead battery, flat tire, fender bender where nobody got hurt. Once in a while, you get something that sticks with you, like the time I pulled a sedan out of Miller's Creek with the driver still inside, or the guy who insisted his car had been moved while he was getting coffee at the truck stop. You learn to take people's stories with a grain of salt. Stress and fear make folks see things that aren't there. But last Tuesday's call was different. I'm still trying to make sense of what happened out there on Route 47. The dispatch came in around 2:30 a.m. Vehicle off the road, mile marker 22, possibly occupied. Linda's voice crackled through the radio. Caller said the driver might still be inside, but she couldn't get close enough to check. Mile marker 22, on Route 47, runs through some of the thickest forest in the county. It's a winding two-lane that connects the valley towns to the interstate, popular with truckers trying to avoid the way stations. During the day, it's scenic enough, but at night, it's just 20 miles of dark trees and no cell coverage. I grabbed my coffee and headed out. Linda had given me the coordinates, so I knew roughly where to look, but finding a car that's actually off the road can mean anything from pulled onto the shoulder to wrapped around a tree 50 yards into the woods. I kept my speed reasonable and watched for reflectors or broken glass. I found it about a quarter mile past the marker. At first glance, it looked like the driver had just pulled off to take a call or get some sleep. The car, a blue Honda Accord, maybe 5 years old, was parked about 30 feet into the tree line on a patch of relatively flat ground. The engine was off, but the headlights were still on, casting weak beams through the fog that had rolled in during the drive. I pulled my truck up parallel to the road and hit the flashers. Standard procedure is to assess the situation before you start hooking anything up, so I grabbed my flashlight and walked over to see what I was dealing with. That's when I noticed the first odd thing. The car's doors were all locked, windows rolled up tight, and I could see someone in the driver's seat. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, gripping the steering while like her life depended on it. When my flashlight beam hit the windshield, she looked up at me with eyes that were wide with terror, makeup running. I tapped on the driver's side window. "Ma'am, I'm with Morrison's Towing. Are you hurt?" She shook her head, but didn't roll down the window. Instead, she pointed toward the woods behind her car and mouthed something I couldn't make out. "Ma'am, I need you to open the window so we can talk," I called, raising my voice slightly. This time she did roll it down, but just a crack. "You need to get that car out of here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Right now. Don't unhook anything. Don't get out again. Just pull it back to the road." "What's wrong? Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm not hurt." She glanced toward the trees again. "But there's something out there. Something big. It's been watching me for the past 2 hours." I'll admit, my first thought was drugs or alcohol. Wouldn't be the first time someone got spooked by shadows while under the influence. But she didn't smell like booze, and her speech was clear and coherent. "What kind of something?" I asked, playing along. "I don't know. I never got a good look at it. But it's huge, bigger than a person. And it's been circling the car, just staying back in the trees where I can't see it clearly." I played my flashlight beam into the woods behind her car. The fog made it hard to see more than 20 feet, but I didn't spot anything unusual. Just pine trees and underbrush, same as the rest of the forest along Route 47. "Ma'am, I don't see anything back there. How about we get your car back on the road, and I'll follow you to the nearest gas station. You can call someone from there." "No." Her voice was firm. "Don't go back there. Just hook up the car and pull it out. Please." Something in her tone made me pause. I've dealt with a lot of scared drivers over the years, and you learn to distinguish between different kinds of fear. Drunk fear is sloppy and unfocused. Accident fear is sharp but fades once the immediate danger passes. This was something else, the kind of steady, controlled terror that comes from extended exposure to real danger. I decided to humor her. "All right, ma'am. I'm going to hook up the car from here and pull you back to the road. Keep your doors locked and stay inside." Walking back to my truck, I found myself listening more carefully to the sound around me. The forest was quiet, unusually quiet. No owl calls, no rustle of small animals moving through the underbrush. Just the low hum of my truck's engine and the distant sound of a semi passing on the interstate miles away. I was backing my truck into position when I noticed the smell. It was strong and musky, like a wet dog that had been rolling in something dead. The kind of smell that makes you breathe through your mouth. I'd encountered plenty of roadkill during my years of towing, but this was different, more intense, and somehow fresher. Getting out to attach the chains, I played my flashlight around the Honda and immediately understood why the woman was so terrified. On the roof of her car were two massive handprints pressed deep into the metal. Not scratches or dents from debris, but actual palm and finger impressions where something had gripped the roof hard enough to deform it. Each handprint was easily twice the size of mine, with long finger marks that ended in what looked like claw scratches. "Fuck," I muttered, running my flashlight along the car's perimeter. There were more marks, scratches along the passenger side like something had tested the strength of the windows, and gouges in the paint where claws had scraped across the metal. "Now you see why I wouldn't get out," the woman called from inside the car, her voice muffled by the glass. I was crouched down, examining the damage when the first branch broke. Not a small twig snapping under the weight of squirrel, but a substantial branch, the kind that takes real force to break. The sound came from somewhere deeper in the trees, maybe 40 yards from where I was working. I stood up and played my flashlight in that direction, but the beam only penetrated about 20 feet into the fog before getting swallowed up. Then came another branch. Crack. This one is closer, maybe 30 yards away. Then another. Crack. From a different direction entirely. "Sir," the woman's voice was tight with anxiety. "It's doing that thing again." "What thing?" "The knocking. I've been doing it all night. Breaking branches, hitting trees. Like it's trying to scare me." As if responding to her words, a loud thump echoed through the forest, the unmistakable sound of something heavy striking a tree trunk. Then another from different locations around us, creating a pattern of impacts that seemed to be moving in a circle around our position. I worked faster to attach the chains, trying to keep my movements efficient and quiet. The whole time, I was acutely aware of being watched. You know that feeling when someone's staring at you from across a room? It was like that, but amplified. Like something with very focused attention was studying every move I made and growing increasingly agitated by our presence. As I was tightening the last chain, my flashlight flickered and went out. I shook it, smacked it against my palm. Nothing. The batteries had been fresh when I started my shift, but now it was completely dead. I had a backup light in the truck, but that meant walking 20 feet in the dark. The branch knocking stopped. The forest went completely silent. "Sir, what happened to your light?" "The battery died. I'm going to get another one from the truck." "Don't leave the car. Please." The fear in her voice was palpable. And standing there in the darkness, surrounded by that oppressive silence and the lingering smell of wet animals, I found I didn't want to leave her either. "I'll be right back. Just get another flashlight." I walked to my truck as casually as I could manage, but every instinct I had was screaming at me to run. The fog seemed to have gotten thicker, and the Honda's headlights only created small pools of illumination that made the surrounding darkness feel deeper. I grabbed my backup flashlight from the cab and was turning to head back when a sound froze me in place. It started as a low rumble, almost subsonic, that I felt in my chest before I actually heard it. Then it rose into something between a roar and a howl, a guttural, primal sound that seemed to come from something with a throat structure unlike any animal I knew. The call lasted maybe 5 seconds, echoing through the trees and seeming to come from all directions at once. When it ended, the silence that followed was somehow worse than the sound itself. That's when the creature stepped into the Honda's headlight beams. "Sir," the woman's voice was urgent now. "We need to go. Right now." I didn't argue. I climbed in my truck, put it in gear, and started pulling the Honda back toward the road. The chains were taut, the car rolling smoothly behind me, when something massive crashed through the underbrush directly in front of us. It stepped into the full glare of my headlights, and for one terrifying moment, I saw it clearly. The creature was enormous, at least 9 feet tall, maybe more. Its body was covered in thick, shaggy, dark hair that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The shoulders were impossibly broad, the arms so long they nearly reached its knees. Its hands ended in fingers that looked more like thick, clawed talons. But the worst part was its face. It resembled that of a human, but with proportions that shouldn't exist on neither man nor beast. The eyes were deep-set and intelligent, reflecting my headlights with a yellow-green shine. When it opened its mouth, I could see teeth that were designed for tearing. It stood there in the road for maybe 3 seconds, studying us with that terrifying intelligence. Then it began walking toward my truck. "Geo!" the woman screamed from behind me. "Geo, Geo, Geo!" I gunned the engine, hoping to scare it off, but the creature didn't flinch. Instead, it picked up speed, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. My truck lurched forward, the Honda's weight dragging behind me, but we were moving too slowly. The creature reached my driver's side door just as I managed to get us rolling. Through the window, I found myself looking up into its face from less than 3 feet away. It placed one massive hand against my door, and I heard the metal groan under the pressure. The handprint it left behind completely covered the window, fingers easily twice the length of a human's, with what looked like thick, black claws at the tips. For a moment, we were locked in this impossible stare-down, me gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had gone white, and this thing was studying me with eyes that held far too much awareness. I could hear its breathing, deep, measured breaths that fogged the glass between us. Then something seemed to shift in its expression, and it stepped back. I didn't wait to see what it would do next. I floored the accelerator, pulling the Honda behind me as fast as the tow chains would allow. In my side mirror, I watched the creature grow smaller, but it didn't disappear into the forest. It just stood there in the middle of the road, watching us go. We didn't stop until we reached the gas station 8 miles down Route 47. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely put the truck in park. Behind me, I could hear the woman crying. Not hysterical sobs, but the quiet crying of someone who just survived something that shouldn't be survivable. When I finally got out to unhook her car, I saw what the creature had left behind. There was a handprint pressed deep into the metal of my truck's door, not just on the surface, but actually deformed inward like the metal was soft clay. Each finger had left a distinct impression, complete with claw marks that had scratched through the paint down to bare steel. The woman stood next to me, staring at the evidence of what we'd just encountered. "Those weren't there before," she whispered. No, I agreed. They weren't. We stood there in the harsh fluorescent light of the gas station, both looking at proof that what we'd experienced was undeniably real. Physical evidence that something impossibly strong had touched our vehicles, had been close enough to kill us both if it had chosen to. "What do you think it wanted?" she asked. I thought about those intelligent eyes, the way it had studied us both so carefully. "I don't think it wanted to hurt us," I said finally. "I think it was curious." She nodded slowly, like it was trying to figure out what we were. I called in sick for the rest of my shift and drove straight home. Spent the next hour sitting in my kitchen, drinking coffee, and trying to make sense of what had happened. The rational part of my mind kept searching for explanations. Maybe someone in an elaborate suit, maybe a circus animal that had escaped. But the handprints on my truck door told a different story. No person, no matter how large, could have compressed steel like that. And no known animal moved the way that creature had moved. I still work the night shift. I still take calls along Route 47 when they come in. But now I carry extra flashlights, and I never work alone in areas where the trees grow thick and the fog rolls in heavily. I had the handprints on my truck filled and painted over, but sometimes, late at night when I'm driving those dark stretches of highway, I run my fingers over the spot where they were and remember. Because whatever's out there in those woods, it's still out there. And now I know it's curious about us. That might be the most terrifying thing of all.